Hello and welcome to Young and Sober, the podcast where we discuss what it means to get sober under the age of 30 and stay sober. If you're sober, sober curious, or just curious, you've come to the right place. Any discussions heard here are personal to the individual and should not be taken as the stance of AA as a whole.
And welcome to episode 4. This week we'll be chatting to Paul, who has come along to talk about being young, sober and working. So, Paul, how are you today, firstly?
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Alex. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good today. I've had a fairly busy morning, and I'm feeling pretty good actually today.
Nice.
Good. So, before we get to your story, we'd first like to start with a question from one of our listeners, and that comes from Nick, who asks, do you need to be a Christian to join AA?
So I thought this was a really interesting question because actually it came off the back of I think it was episode 1, where Christian and I shared that we'd both been listening to worship music and church music. And my friend just messaged me saying, I didn't know that you were Christian if you went to AA. And I kind of said, oh, you're not? Oh no, have we made it seem like you have to be Christian to be in AA? So I said to her, and I mean, I'll say the same thing now, that, you know, the concept is having an idea of a power that's greater than you. And I know that when I first came into recovery, I saw the word God and I was really put off. I grew up with my dad who was Christian and my mum who was an atheist. So it was a very confusing situation. And I kind of never really believed in God. And then when somebody explained to me that it didn't have to be the Christian God, it didn't have to be any specific religious God, it just had to be this idea of something that is greater than me and that I am not the center of things and that I am not in control of everything. Because another thing I learned when I came into AA is that I like to think that I can control everything and I like to try to control everything as much as possible. What did you guys think when you first came in?
Well, I mean, first, I did not think it was Christian when I came in, and something that was hammered home to me when I first came into AA was, as well as doing the steps, was learning a bit more about the traditions, and that one of the traditions kind of does talk about how we are not allied to any sect, denomination. That means, you know, religion. Nor are we affiliated with any sort of politics, outside organisation or institutions. And yeah, I mean, it talks about it in the steps, God of our own understanding. And therefore, for some people, that might mean a God of their faith. Some people come in totally atheist and don't have religion, which is the beautiful thing, which means it's, you know, very inclusive thing to be a part of. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it, Paul?
Well, I remember coming in and somebody saying to me very quickly that this is a spiritual program, not a religious one. And I didn't really understand what spirituality was. And he said, well, firstly, spirituality is for those who have been to hell, and religion is for those who fear hell. And I remember thinking, I like the sound of that. I can identify with that. But, you know, on my travels, I've had some strange things happening. I had a business and we opened an office in Houston, of all places. And the office, it'd been open a day, and I went to find the nearest AA meeting. It was actually in a church next door to our new office that we had. And it's right, you don't need to be religious. You need to be able to, as you say, find a power greater than yourself. And how that is, how you conceptualize that is down to you, you know. And that's the beautiful thing about AA. There's a lot of kind of flexibility around that, and that's one of the things I certainly love.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I mentioned in the first podcast as well, you know, I've got friends who talk about their higher power being the way that they relate to people and the power of connection. And then there's other people who say, you know, I feel the most at peace when I'm in nature. So nature is my higher power. And like Christian was saying, you know, it's not prescriptive. There is nothing in the AA traditions or steps that says it has to be this type of concept of a higher power. It's just something that brings you peace and something that's greater than us.
Something that's bigger than you, that is not you or another human being. So, you know, I've heard people talking about the ocean or gravity.
Yeah.
Like, there's no denying. Like, if you don't believe in God, you can't deny that gravity is more powerful than you, right? I think that's safe to say. So that's just one example.
Yeah. And when you talk about gravity, actually, it's you know, it's something that we can't necessarily explain why it works, but we know it works, just like the program, which I think is a really nice way to think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Paul, welcome again. Just to kind of give a bit of context, what brought you to sobriety, and how long have you been sober today?
So I've been sober nearly 15 years. What brought me to it really was me being brought to my knees. You know, I'd had, you know, from the outsider looking in, I had a lot of things going for me, and I probably didn't necessarily look like a drunk. And you know, I had a house, I had a family, I'd still had my friends in my life, had a, you know, a family. There was a level of kind of, people would probably see, you know, from a material perspective, of somebody who was doing well, but fundamentally I was absolutely broken when I came to the doors of AA. And I came here through the kindness of one other person really making a suggestion that I give it a try. And I say the rest is history in many ways, but I'm so grateful for their intervention in doing that.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of working, so I'm a nanny. Christian is in life coaching and personal training. Do you just want to give us a bit of context for what it is that you do?
So my core area, I suppose, is recruitment. And I got into recruitment in my 20s, and I suppose I was regarded as pretty good at it. I was able to build a company up to having, you know, 150 people working for us, you know, hundreds of people working all over the world on assignment for us. And we were able to sell out of that business in 2015. And I've gone on from then, and, you know, I'm an investor in healthcare, technology, recruitment. And, you know, I'm very fortunate in the areas and the kind of different groups of people that I get to work with all over the world now. So that's kind of where it's taken me to.
Amazing.
So, Paul, so you sort of, as you said, you worked in recruitment from quite an early age. I mean, recruitment is not an industry I've worked in. I have worked in sort of quite fast-paced, sales, target-driven environments, and I know recruitment is sort of, I'd say maybe even more, you know, it's known to be a fast-paced environment, and it's also not. It's also known to have that sort of work hard, play hard mentality. I mean, can you tell us like a bit about your experience, like pre-sobriety, of how that kind of perhaps accelerated your alcoholism, and how you've managed to continue working in that industry since getting sober, and how that might have changed?
Yes. What I'd say is recruitment, certainly when I got into it, it brings together a certain type, a certain grouping of people, usually, you know, personalities who are not necessarily aware of where their place is in life. Usually people are very sociable, often very driven, with sometimes not with the greatest attention span, but throw them all together. That's often where the magic happens. But what I'd say is one of the lubricants of a successful sales organization has often been alcohol. But the conviviality that alcohol, brings when everybody's together, and that's what recruitment was like. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you'd hit Thursday, you'd be out with all your colleagues who were also your friends, who all drank and all had it, all young and were all very driven and wanting to earn, money. And in many ways, I suppose, make a bit of a name for themselves. And that would then, you'd be back on the sales floor on a Friday, and then you'd be out again, and then it bleeds into the weekend. And you kind of, I always say you're sweating on your pillow on a Sunday night, and you would be very fearful on a Monday morning. By Tuesday, you're getting back in, you'd have, Tuesday would be a bit of a nightmare, but by Wednesday, you were back in the game. And that was a cycle. That was a cycle that I was on and many others were on. For some, they didn't necessarily have an obsession around alcohol, and were able to kind of, manage other elements of their life pretty comfortably. Whereas with me, I was often ruined by the weekend. And my weekends weren't particularly full, but I was back on the work treadmill on a Monday.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly know that before getting sober, I actually worked in South Africa for a volunteer organization. And what would happen for me is we would be bringing volunteers in, and I would have to get them excited, and I'd have to tell them and train them. And part of my persona and part of how I did that was to take them all out, and we would all go drinking together, and then we would all go, into volunteering together on Monday. And because of the nature of the job, we would go out a lot during the week as well. And I found that because volunteers would come for any time between 2 weeks and 6 months, what would happen is they would arrive and I would be fun, exciting Alex, and we would be going out and we would be going into work and everything would be fine. And then slowly after the course of that time, me not drinking like the others and also not reacting to drink like the others, I would become more and more depleted. And then by the time they left, I would be an absolute mess. But what would happen is they would go, I would have a little break, and then the new recruits would come in and I would start all over again. And that cycle for me just continued for 2.5 years. And by the end of the 2.5 years, I was a broken person because I had just been repeating over and over again this cycle of just excitement and then ending up in crisis, excitement, ending up in crisis. And actually, when I came home, it was 3 weeks after I moved back from South Africa that I got sober. And I mean, my work journey, my work life changed completely when I got sober. I actually decided to go a different route. I went back to university and got a teaching degree. But I know that for me, being in that kind of environment, I knew when I got sober that working in that environment wasn't going to work for me. And Christian, I think you had something similar, didn't you?
Yeah. So I think I touched on, I worked, when I sort of hit my bottom, I was working in a sales kind of corporate environment. And I liked, Paul, how you touched on how a lot of people that kind of end up in that kind of recruitment world, or maybe even sales, are people that don't really know their place in the world. And I think, well, certainly my experience, I kind of accidentally fell into sales. I was working in events, I was temping in events. Somebody said, I think you might be quite good at sales, why not give it a go? And I did. And, that wasn't the plan. But that was kind of like the story of my life. It was like, I never really had a plan. I just kind of was going with the flow, and just, if something seemed like a good opportunity, then I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll try that. But yeah, certainly when I moved from that business to another business, which was just known to be very sort of intense, drinking was part of the subculture, and that was kind of, if the team did well, it would be like pub at lunchtime, and that was kind of the reward for having a good week. Paul, I'm interested to know, sorry, let me just sort of finish my train of thought there. Actually, yeah, so in terms of transitioning, I continued working in that environment when I first came into AA, but after my first year, it was suggested to me in my first year not to make any big changes, and I stuck with it. But I knew this isn't, I don't know, there was something about it where I was like, I was making money, but I was just not feeling anything. You know, I was just kind of like, I don't know, it just wasn't, I think I realized that I actually quite enjoyed the process of selling, but I wasn't that excited by the financial side of it. And that's what made me, it took me a couple of years to sort of figure out what the next move is for me. And then, yeah, got my personal training qualification because I'd always been quite athletic, quite sporty. And I'm just really interested in health and well-being, which I think, you know, recovery is part of that for me. You know, recovery gives me well-being, but also keeping fit is another string to the bow. Paul, for you, so did you notice, like, your drinking, with that sort of drinking culture, did you find that your drinking was different to your peers, maybe towards the end, or was there anything different?
Yeah, my drinking became, my behaviour was quite isolatory in the way I went about it. I mean, you know, recruitment is is a social occupation. You know, my drinking had ceased being that, and you know, I was a binge pattern drinker, but the days between my drinking had started to shorten, and the amount I could consume had, you know, shortened in many ways as well, because my ability to feel the effects that I once kind of, you know, looked for had gone. You know, it just simply stopped working. And you know, my challenge was certainly coming into recovery was, how am I going to be able to sell? How am I going to be able to operate in an environment where, you know, you're often on show, your persona is of somebody who is the entertainer, you know. And I can remember speaking to my sponsor, who was a maitre d' in a restaurant, and he was like, "Don't worry about it." I goes, but don't worry about it. You just, it's going to be as it's going to be. You know, work your program, do the steps, work the steps, spend this time on yourself and trying to understand the importance of helping others, and the answer will come. And he was so right, because what happened is, there was my job, you could see it in two ways. Me as an actual recruiter, did I become better at it? I became so much better at it, because I became very honest, and I learned how to communicate with people, and I was very comfortable at saying, no, I'm not happy with that, or don't really think it can work like that. Whereas in the past, I'd have said yes to everything. And then when it all exploded, I'd run off and drink and hide. And then someone else would have to help me pick up the mess. And that just stopped happening, because I was able to communicate compassionately, but honestly. And that for me, that was a really powerful thing to learn. And I actually became better at managing and leading people, because most of the people who were coming into my business at the time were usually straight out of university, some in their early 20s. And I would be their mentor, their guide, and for some of them for over 10 years. And I was able to do that because I was able to listen. I was able to do a lot of the things I couldn't do before. Now, was it an environment where people still drank? Yes. Was I comfortable with that? Yes. Because my problem wasn't necessarily, I didn't become a hater of alcohol or all things that associated to alcohol. I just learned it didn't agree with me. And it came, you know, I think I'm kind of borrowing this from Robert Downey Jr., but, you know, I break out in handcuffs. you know, if I had any alcohol. But I remember before I came, I was really into dance music, really into going to raving, you know, all that whole subculture, ease and everything. That was me. And I was really quite sad that I'd never go to a club again. And I remember saying this in passing to somebody, and they were like, "What? Why do you have to stop going clubbing? It's a good idea in these early, you know, 6 months, a year, while you're working on yourself, to kind of not tempt yourself. But in time, you know, if you're in fit spiritual condition, there's absolutely no reason you can't go anywhere in the world, do whatever makes you feel good. There's nothing stopping that. And that for me really resonated, because I was young, I was still around a lot of young people, and I needed that. And you know, in my job, you know, we had trips to Ibiza, Vegas. You know, the first time we went to Vegas, I remember we took 13 people, and we went down, we called it like the Ocean's 13, or no, to 11, Ocean's 11. First thing I did when I got there, I went to an AA meeting. And every day when I was there, I went to an AA meeting, and I kind of had that whole Vegas experience, but also I was meeting these people and they had an AA clubhouse just outside Vegas. I was meeting all these wonderful people, and that for me kind of sums it up, really. I mean, fit spiritual condition, working on myself, working on my program, takes care of things.
Yeah, I loved you mentioned connection, and how, you know, with sobriety comes this ability to form genuine connections with people. And we talked about this in our socializing podcast, how the kind of connections we build with people now are so much more real. And I imagine that for you also continued in a work sense. You know, people respond when we truly come to know ourselves and are comfortable with being ourselves, which we do learn in sobriety. People respond to that so positively. And you mentioning going to meetings, one question I had is what were kind of things that you had to put in place in terms of your working day or your working week that helped you to maintain your sobriety? Because I know for me, things like meditating in the morning, doing my gratitude list at the end of the day, sometimes getting to a meeting at lunchtime is really helpful. What are the kind of changes that you had to make to keep your sobriety kind of in check?
Well, for me, I had fixed home groups, which I always had service at. And nothing got in the way of it. Nothing. I remember my football team got to the semi-finals of, I think, the Champions League, and I didn't miss my home group. I kind of, fair enough. I also I was working near Borough Market, and obviously I'm in the you know, you're near Southwark Cathedral. You know, I'd nearly every day I'd go in there, I'd light a candle and meditate for like 5-10 minutes. And it was often important to get out of my office and go and do that, because, you know, this is a place that, you know, it goes back nearly over 1,000 years, and I'm able to sit there and be with myself in you know, in an office environment which is hectic. Borough Market's quite hectic, but go in there and sit in there and reflect and have that kind of step 11 time was, you know, very important. And you know, step 10s played a massive component, and they still do, of managing, you know, my recovery, really, because as your company gets bigger and you become more successful, you have more challenges that come your way, and it can be completely relentless. So having the tool step 10, where it's like a pressure valve that gets released in your head at the end of every day, but also being able to, you know, do a gratitude list and reflect on your part in the day. Very important. Very important.
Yeah. No, thanks, Paul, for sharing that, because I totally resonate with the that pressure tap. I think, and you talked about earlier, you talked about how you'd sort of maybe mess things up at work, and then you would run away essentially, and just like just that fear and stress were two significant contributors to my reasons for having to drink, to release that pressure that was in my head. And it didn't matter, you know, like it didn't matter if I knew that the consequences weren't going to be pretty. I just didn't have any other coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And I didn't have what we're given in the program, which is those suggestions that are essentially kind of spiritual armor, really, against having to, you know, that defense against that first drink. But I had to have that initial step one. I had to admit that I'd completely lost control of it to even consider using, you know, utilizing the tools. And I loved what you talked about with step 10, doing personal, you know, the inventory. I try and do it daily. And it's probably something that I, you know, could probably be a bit more thorough with from time to time, but it's the whole package, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, just for listeners, so for listeners that don't know the kind of AA lingo,
Yeah.
Home group. So home group is a meeting that you go to regularly every week. And a lot of people, you know, you can have one home group. A lot of people, you know, you form really, really lovely bonds with people in the meetings that you keep going back to. So you keep going back to them. And sometimes, I think Christian shared a little while ago, the first meeting that he went to, he didn't necessarily connect with. So he found Vauxhall Newcomers, which we shout out every week. And that's his home group that he goes back to every week. And then secondly, service. So there's kind of positions at meetings that people can hold. And when you first start going, you can be a greeter. So you just say hello to people that come in and welcome them. You could be making the tea, you could be running the meeting later on, and they're just positions that you take on. And usually that lasts for about a year, and then you hand the position over to somebody else. And then Paul and Christian, you both mentioned step 10. So in terms of an inventory, what that means is at the end of each day, reflecting on the interactions you've had. And is there an interaction where maybe you said something that you shouldn't have said, or you approached a situation in a way that you regret? And what step 10 is taking responsibility for those things, and then kind of saying sorry, or just having a conversation with somebody just to kind of round that out. So by the end of each day, you're not left with this guilt or this shame around an interaction that you had, and you feel like you've kind of made amends for it. And then lastly, step 11, which is meditation and prayer. So as we mentioned in the question at the beginning, it's a spiritual program, and in our early days, it is suggested that we pray and suggested that we meditate. And you know, I remember saying to my sponsor, oh, but I don't believe in God. Like, what's the point in praying? What's the point in, you know, meditating when I don't have any idea what I'm praying to or why I'm meditating? And she said, Alex, just do it. Even if you don't believe it, just do it, because it feels better. And lastly, again, Christian, you mentioned the pressure cooker. And that was an analogy that meant so much to me in my early days, because I remember, like, I'd get to the end of the day and I would just have this head full of anxious thoughts and anger and frustration. And meetings and prayer for me were ways of just opening the top of that pressure cooker and just letting all of that stuff out, and left me at the end of the day just feeling like, okay, I've let it all out now. Like, I'm good. I can do it. I can keep going. So another question I had, which I'm very interested in, I'm very open about my recovery at work. At the moment, I mean, it depends what family I'm working for, but at the moment, my boss knows that I'm in recovery. And I know that's not something that necessarily translates across every industry. I know that for Christian, he tends to work with people in recovery, so sometimes it makes it a little bit easier. How open, Paul, are you about your recovery and your work life?
So when I had my last company, I was very open about it. Today, you know, I own a mental health and addiction service, so you know, I'm very open about it, and I think, you know, I'm very comfortable with that. I'm just very comfortable, because what I've found over the years is it just gets out of the way. You know, it just gets out of the way, and people will reach out for you with a can I have a word? I would be interested in your opinion on. And, you know, I think over the years, various people have come into recovery through the rooms or through, you know, treatment facilities because of that openness. Now, what I also know is for some people, even friends of mine who are in the same industry, they're not comfortable with sharing it. And, you know, it's a personal thing, and you have to become, you should never, no one should, no one should ever coerce anyone else into that. People need to be very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you know, like you said, no one should feel like they have to share that. I think that in a lot of industries, or I know there's definitely been families that I've worked for where I felt like the stigma would be too big and they wouldn't believe that I would be capable of adequately or doing my job well because of my history of addiction, and that it would cause them to worry. I mean, I work with small children, and I think that's totally fair enough. So yeah, I mean, I've been with this family that I work for quite a long time now, and I know them well enough to know that it's okay. But I think for listeners, it's important to, you know, not everybody needs to know that about you. It's okay that you keep your sobriety for yourself and for the friends that you have in recovery. What do you think, Christian?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal choice. For me, I actually did speak to not my line manager initially, but my director, who I had a good relationship with, because he kind of brought me over to the company that he was working for. And it was a really, he said to me, well, my mum's an alcoholic, and you know, he was like, I admire what you're doing, and I only wish that, you know, my mum would commit to it. So I mean, that, you know, I think alcoholism affects everybody, potentially not firsthand, but you don't realize, you know, what, you know, especially at work, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, totally. And I think it also, in a way, people have seen in me, and I'm sure they have in you, the way that we change when we come into recovery. We learn to work on ourselves. Like we were talking about step 10, you know, for the average person coming to the end of the day and going, okay, what have I done today where I could have done it better, or what mistakes have I made that I could make reparations for? Actually, that's an incredible thing for a working situation, because it really does away with things like resentment and arguments, because we're taught to be so much more careful about the way that we interact with people. So in a way, you know, it does wonders for my working life, I know, because I'm so much more of a level-headed, nice person to be around. And, you know, my friends and family, you know, noticed that as well. Like people have just said, you've got this glow about you now that you didn't have before. And I'm sure you found the same thing. So in terms of enjoying your job, Paul, how do you feel like there are things that you enjoy about your job now that you didn't necessarily feel before or recognize before? How has your kind of relationship with your job changed?
I think it's just the freedom now. You know, one of the things that was always on me was, if we go somewhere, go on a trip, or there's an event, it was on me. I knew I would mess up. I don't have that anymore. And it's because I've got multiple businesses across multiple disciplines. I've got it's amazing. I get to work with sports psychologists in Spain, recruiters up in Leicester, software developers in Eastern Europe. You know, it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And in many ways, because I put my program first, everything else always flows from that. So I don't feel that there's necessarily any limits on what I can do, which I also have to be careful of as well, because you know, you don't want to be too risky in everything you do, and that's why I have, you know, sponsor, you know, other good guides in recovery to kind of right size me sometimes, so I can check my thinking by them, and you know, it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, that's it's inspiring, Paul, and you know, it's part of the reason why I got you on the show, because I'd heard that you'd had multiple businesses, and clearly, you know, you're doing very well for yourself. And the only difference is, you know, that you're doing even better for yourself than you were whilst you were drinking. But not only that, you also feel good about yourself and good inside, you know, and that is what recovery is giving us, really. It's realizing that it's not actually all the external stuff, all the success, all the money or things that we attribute really are just a bonus. And without, as you said, putting this stuff first, A, none of it really matters. B, you're going to lose it anyway, because, you know, we know what we're like. You know, we're just king saboteurs, aren't we? You know, if we don't have a program, you know, we just have no other choice but to pick up. It's a sort of cunning, very cunning disease like that. And yeah, you've been sober now for, what was it? Did you say again? How many years? 15 years. Yeah. One day at a time, right?
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah. Yeah, Christian, when you were talking about, you know, putting sobriety first, so after I did my teaching degree, I got a job in a nursery. And for me, I kind of felt like this was my purpose. This was the thing that I'd been searching for. And I definitely ended up putting much more importance on my job than I did on my recovery. And so at 2 years sober, I ended up actually hitting a massive emotional rock bottom, because I had stopped going to therapy. I'd stopped going to meetings because I was too tired from work. My addiction ended up funneling into workaholism, because I was staying up until 2-3 in the morning planning and making resources. And, you know, people don't think that like working in a nursery can take over your whole life. But for me, because I have that addictive personality, it did. And so by the end of 2018, my brain shut down and I couldn't speak. I had no short-term memory. My parents, when they spoke to me, said it sounded like talking to a 5-year-old. And I actually ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And I was in there for 5 weeks. And I think I say this purely because, just as you were saying, when we don't put recovery first and when we don't keep doing the things that are suggested, the first thing for me that goes is my thinking. And as soon as my thinking starts going, that will lead me to a drink if I don't take the right steps. So, you know, doing those daily practices, like we've all been talking about, putting recovery first and understanding that if we don't have this, we don't have anything. All of that money, you know, that society tells us are going to make us happy. If I have that house, if I have that relationship, that's not what works. What works is spiritual work, the internal work. And when I do that work, when my sobriety and mental health and my emotional sobriety come first, then everything gets easier. And the world can actually throw whatever it wants to at me. But when I'm level, and that's okay, and I can deal with it because sobriety gives me the tools. Of any big challenges that have come up for you in your work where you've really had to kind of dig deep into your that?
Yeah, I'd say I can remember after about 4 years of being in, my company was doing so well. We had like the best year we'd ever had by miles. But by the end of that year, I was coming into Christmas, and I was still in work mode. And what happened is I clearly let work take over, and it was that pursuit of success and money, and it wasn't always necessarily financial. It was just we can do more, and that's, you know, alcoholism is a disease of more.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And what you said there about workaholism, that is my now default. I have to be very, very careful about that. And it can be work, but it can also be, would you be interested in getting involved in this and this and this and this, and knowing when to go, no, I can't do it, because my first response is, oh yeah, I can help with that. I can, I'll get involved in that. And what I'm
I
doing.
can do everything.
Everything. I'll get involved in that. And then you realise you could probably start it, but you couldn't follow through on it. And people might end up then being reliant on you and your force and your personality or whatever to drive that forward. And you haven't got that bandwidth.
You let them down as well, right? You let them down because they're expecting more.
Totally. So I have to be careful of that. I mean, in my company, we lost someone who died, who was working for us, and it was quite a tragic. It was a tragic accident. What happened, and that challenged me in different ways because this guy was such a wonderful person, and just the whole kind of why. Why has this been allowed to happen, and being able, but also my recovery, my program was able to help me be there for other people and lead through what was an utter crisis for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Was that from? Sorry to interrupt, Alex. Was that from alcoholism?
No,
that he passed, or
no, this person, he had a heart defect that had gone undiagnosed, and one day they'd gone out and he passed away in the night, and it was but this was a person who was a very significant person in the business, and but being able to kind of go and be there for other people and accept that this is just a dreadful thing, and people were grieving openly for a long time, but having a program, but having other people within the fellowship to support me, by extension, really important. And I'm very grateful to have had that.
Yeah.
There was something that you said, Paul, about the falling into workaholism, and do you know what I think? I think it's not just alcoholics that necessarily suffer from this feeling of needing more, more of more money, more this, more that, and I think we're sort of to a certain degree trapped in a sort of that we're meant to be chasing after these things, and that they are going to somehow, fix whatever it is that we're missing, and it's that kind of mindset of I'll be happy when.
Yeah.
I'll be happy when I have this. I'll be happy when I have that.
Yeah.
And what's lovely about the program, I think, is that alcoholic or no alcoholic, is that, we practice gratitude every day, regardless of what I've got or what I haven't got. It gives me an opportunity to be of service to other people, which I've actually realized, if I do a chair at a meeting, the feeling that I get when I hear people at the end saying, thank you so much, I've really resonated, you've given me hope, that is just like amazing. That's the stuff, isn't it? It's not, how many zeros on my bank account, on my bank account. It's that, purpose. And I think that was what I was really longing for. I was wondering, why was I was wondering, why am I feeling so unfulfilled? Like I should be happy. I was like you, Paul, I had the success, people on the outside think, he's doing pretty well. But I was dead. I was dead inside. Why was I having to go home and drink and use other substances on my own? It's just like, and that's, for me, that's what I think, that's the reason why. That's the reason.
And we can fill our, sorry.
No, please.
We can fill our time with so many different things. I distract myself from my thinking because being on my own is painful and difficult and I can't stand it. And I know that when my recovery is in a good place, I can come home from a hard day at work and I can sit on my own in my flat and still feel that everything is okay. And when I was drinking and using, it was a totally different story, because yes, I would be able to get through the work day, but every time I was by myself, when I woke up first thing in the morning, when I came home from work and sat by myself, I felt completely and utterly miserable. I was full of fear. I had that knot of fear in my stomach all the time, and I could distract myself with so using, watching Netflix, being with friends. But then that moment, as soon as I was on my own and having to sit with myself, I couldn't cope with it, you know. And I mean, I imagine it's the same for you now. You know, I can sit in my own head and not have that be a scary place to be.
It is. I mean, it's that being at peace is so important. And you know, listen, it's not like that every day at all. I can't even go back to what you were saying there, Christian, about I think society, you know, we socialize our children and into a way of thinking that it's all about success, it's all about money, it's all about, you know, your position in society. You know, the reality is things like gratitude, things like kindness, you know, these are important things. You know, I saw a quote the other day, and it was about, and I think they said, you know, stop teaching your kids to be top of the class, but to be the person to sit with the kid who's alone at the dinner table. You know, and that kind of, I was like, that is just so right. You know, because that person will be fulfilled. Now, you know, it might financially, they may not be, you know, but that might not be important to them because they will get so much from helping other people. And you know, to be able to, the reality to have both, oh, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's the dream.
That's the dream for a lot of people. But I think if I had to have one or the other, you know, peace of mind and being able to sit with oneself and be, you know, safe in the knowledge that your service and able to help other people. So get any better than that.
It's funny, isn't it? I think by our human nature is that we want to be recognized, whether that's for the service we give to others, or whether that's the success that we've, you know, there's a sort of self-made man kind of thing, isn't there? Like that seems to be something that particularly men, I think, I don't know, I mean, I know some women are obviously very ambitious and are self-made, etc. But I think there's some romantic ideas like the self-made man, like you go get it and you know, anything is possible and you'll get all the recognition and the plaudits and everything will be great. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely, I feel like that can be a bit of a battle for me personally. I don't know about you, but it's like, you know, I actually recently did like a list of like values, like what are my values, you know, and for the first time in a long time, I'd written down recognition. And I'd sort of denied that for some time because I felt like, you know, that was like egotistical or like, you know, not an attractive value to have. But I think I've come to accept that, yeah, maybe that is something that I want. And it might not be in the way that I first thought. It might not be in the way that I initially thought I wanted recognition, but it's kind of almost, it's kind of changed. You know, I can't deny, you know, doing this podcast, you know, I want it to be heard by a lot of people. I want it to do well. I want it to help a lot of people.
It's also the reason for that changes, I think, because I have exactly the same, Christian. Like, I want to be recognized. I want people to think that I'm good at something. I would really, really like that. And I've come to realize in recovery, actually, the reason for that has changed. When I was drinking, I wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted to be well known for different reasons. Whereas now, for example, with the podcast, I have exactly the same sense that you have. I want it to do well, but I don't want it to do well because I want to be known for it. I want it to do well because I want people who need to hear it. And I think the other thing is about this, you know, we've talked a lot about societal expectation. And when I went from being a teacher to a nanny, because being a teacher wasn't working at that time for my mental health, I had this thought where it was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell people I'm a nanny rather than tell people I'm a teacher. that for me feel as impressive. And I really had to check that, because actually for my sobriety and for my mental health right now, and being a teacher doesn't. And that's okay, because right now I'm fitting my work around my life and my work around my sobriety, rather in my life around my work. My work is not the center of who I am anymore. And that for me personally worked really well. And I know that, you know, for some people their purpose needs to be in their work, but I personally believe that if people come away from an interaction with me feeling better than they did before, feeling better about themselves, feeling like they've got something from an interaction with me, that's what I believe my purpose is. And that doesn't matter whether it's in work, whether it's in friendships, whether it's through this podcast. That's what I believe my purpose is. And I think our purpose changes when we get sober. Did you find that as well?
Purpose is absolutely central to everything, I think. And I've certainly found over. So I sold my company in 2015, and you know I'd had that company for 13 years, and you know there was quite a bit of identity attached to that. But because of my recovery, it was all right. You know, I kind of moved on from it really quickly, and I had a business partner who, you know, he's gone into other things as well. But I was really comfortable, you know, going on that journey of trying to seek out what my purpose is. I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to help people, you know, and whether that's in recruitment and helping them find jobs, or whether it's in, you know, having a mental health service, helping people with their mental health, or you know, or technology, or whatever it is, it's helping people, and it's very simple. That now, if I'm recognised for being good at that, great. That's really good. That will make me feel good. I know that's okay. If I make money out of it, will I be? Yeah, of course, it's brilliant. You know, but as long as I don't lose money, mate, in it, you know, it's okay. But it's an opportunity to help people, and I'm blessed, absolutely blessed to be able to do that. You know, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, Paul, I think what you said there about, yeah, helping others is your sort of main purpose. And I think that is the huge shift, particularly when you're working in a culture where really it is about money. You know, people don't do sales if they don't want to make money. People don't do recruitment really if they don't want to make money. This is kind of, there are certain industries where you do it because you want to make money, but I think it's flipping it over from what can I get from you, gimme, you know, kind of Wolf of Wall Street, to how can I genuinely be of service, you know, and that's something I learned in recovery. It's like, how can I present something, you know, it might be a solution to someone's problem. Like in my case, it would be personal training. You know, where are, you know, what are your needs? Like, what are your goals? You know, what can, you know, and a genuine interest in that. And, you know, the skill of, I guess, any sort of sales related or business related thing is presenting it in an attractive way so that they buy, you know, and that is a skill. But ultimately it's the fact that it's coming from the right place. You know, it's not trying to shaft somebody or just to, you know, I've got a target to hit, I've got commission to make, gimme, or I'll just lie to you and tell you it's this when actually it's that. Or, you know, and you touched on it earlier, Paul, about how you've got that integrity and that honesty now where you can kind of just tell it how it is, and say no, or you can speak up when you want to speak up, and all those good things that I've definitely started to experience as a result of being in recovery.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's wrap up with some gratitude. Paul, what's something that you're grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? I'm grateful for my health, you know, for my health, and you know, it's particularly in these times, you know, to be able to, you know, live and breathe, and, you know, still have a, you know, a smile on myself, and to share some time with, you know, with you two, you know, it's been great. You know, I'm very, very grateful for that.
Amazing. Christian?
Yeah, I'm generally, I'll second that. I'm really grateful, Paul, to have got to know you more, to meet you. I hope that we can still, you know, keep connected. I can be your newcomer call if you want. it will keep me humble. So yeah, no, I've really enjoyed today's episode. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm so grateful that you came to talk to us today, Paul. It's been amazing, and I feel like the thing that's so incredible is that when we talk to each other like this, we always learn something new, and we always get a different perspective. And I love being challenged on my thinking and being, you know, just constantly pushed to be better. So thank you so much. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us and listening in. We will be back next week with another speaker. Please do like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or feedback about what you've heard today, we would love to hear from you. Send us a message and follow us on Instagram at Young and Sober Podcast, or email us at youngandsober@outlook.com. That is it for yet another episode. We are Young and Sober. Bye.
Bye.